last year, on this page, we talked about building your apps UI using the new interactive frameworks from Apple and Google. But since then, a lot has been talked about AI. And today, I will probably sound like the CEO of Google as we explore how does AI impact mobile development. Here's what we're going to do. First, a quick intro of why this is important. Then, we'll go through the process of actually building an app from scratch using AI tools as much as possible. And finally, we'll get into integrating AI features into the app as a functionality. So, why should we care about this? Well, on average, people spend a lot of time on their phone. Most of them in apps. They prefer shopping on mobile, and they bring a lot of revenue and demand to their portals. As for the AI side, you probably noticed that it's growing a lot lately. Businesses are either using AI already or they plan to use it soon. And also people use it on their devices every day, even without knowing it. But what does AI actually do? And here's an interesting thing. So AI can really improve any industry out there, starting from personalized learning journeys to improve recommendations, recommendations in healthcare, better estimates for transportation, and of course it can help us software developers to do better our work. But we will do that best statement to the best day by actually building an app from scratch using AI as much as possible. We will go through these stages, starting from nothing, getting some ideas, then doing the graphic design, the coding itself, and the documentation. And hopefully we'll get to a good result. Brainstorm. So, one thing I forgot to mention here is this presentation is not so much about what tools to pick, but how to use those tools to get what you want. So, I asked for Google friend ChatGPT. I gave him context about today's presentation and I asked for 5 app ideas. Here's what I got. Object recognition app, sentiment analysis app, handwriting. So these are all quite technical, but I need something with some input as well, so we can input some inputs. And we got to this. Again, our recipe system. So I think all of us at some point have some leftover ingredients in our fridge, and this app can suggest recipes based on those ingredients to reduce food waste. You can also add a few other features. People usually like food, so let's continue with this. The next step would be to see how the features connect with each other, and for that we need a wireframe. Now, that's how a wireframe looks, but ChatGPT doesn't know how to draw a wireframe, so I asked for a list of streets instead, just for a V1 for a small prototype. And we have an ingredient list, present suggestions, and favorites. Okay. Yeah. So, oh, sorry. Let's take a few slides. Yeah. So for the brainstorm part, I will give you 4 out of 5 because you can give your context and it really makes that down and iterate on your ideas. But at the same time, it's not really good on determining the success of the app because it doesn't know the competition and the demand for what you're asking. Moving on to the second stage, the graphic design. You probably know all these tools. The most popular ones, DALL-E, Midjourney, and Stable Diffusion. But I found a really interesting one called Playground AI, which is very similar to Figma. Probably, if you didn't heard about Figma, it's a great tool for design. It has a canvas on which you can generate multiple images. You can also include text and different characters. You can also export in high resolution, which is very important for editing. So I tried a few products. Classic mobile app, recipes to cook, elegant minimalist design, read select the ingredients, and then to get the recipes. This is the UI format. If you cannot read text, it's because it's not coherent, it's just a set of random characters, but it's good for inspiration. It's not great for looking at dimensions and for high-fidelity design. Next, we need an app, and with just a couple of tries, I could get to the second app, which in my opinion looks good for what we need for the food recipe app, and we can continue with that. And finally, I wanted to try it for item illustrations, because you need this in your area at some point. For example, if you search for some ingredients and you don't have any results, I might do more of that, and I'm not results there. And the first two were not great, but the third one looks promising for no results for home. And based on that, you can also ask the design AI to play on AI based on an image that you have to generate another one. So based on this, I also generated the no favorites pattern. Considering all of this, I would say that for graphic design, it's integrated with mobile app development. I will give it 3 out of 5 because they are good for generating the high-level theme for that, and you can integrate with it, you can generate items. But at the same time, it's not a high-fidelity design that you can use and implement it code data. Okay, now we get to the code generation one. Here, we need to pick a side because I don't have time to do both. So I want to ask you, if you would build your own tomorrow, would it be for iOS or Android? And please don't get iOS as your choice. Okay, and now for Android. Well, alright. It seems like more people choose Android, so I assume you're a bit familiar with that. And if you're familiar with Android, I suggest going further with iOS. We will change it as much as possible. Again, this is not about the best tool, but how to use that. So let's try to use ChatGPT as much as possible for building your app. This is a simplified architecture of how we build, just that we have a visual representation. And the first logical step is to start with the view. That is the part. So, I told you about the recipe and I asked for a Swift UI view to serve as the initial screen, so the screen to start from. And from there we have 2 buttons that indicate all screens. This is the code, output in the code of Swift UI, and I also asked to put it in the tab. This is what we got. Not great, not very good. Or in Romanian, until something. But we can go to the next step and polish it. And for polishing it, the good thing is we can build it either like high-level instructions and make it look more like Apple Music, or make it more beautiful and stylish. But we can also give it specific things like change the pink color of the top bar. Both options work. And so that was the second step. Then we had the third step. I also made a search bar, searching the ingredients. I integrated the item generated earlier, and finally to improve even more the list of ingredients, I tried to ask it to move the left and the right, but to be honest, in this step it was way easier to do it myself and code based on what it would generate instead of keep trying to do out whatever. So these are the stages, and I'm not a designer, but I think we made some progress. Now the next screen and the last screen before we go to the logic part is we need a screen for the recipes, because now we have the ingredients, we select them, and now we need to get some recipes. For that, I asked for a scroll over the week with 2 columns, and I got something like this. Some cards with a with shadow, the image, and the title, everything's okay. So now we're kind of at the end of the UI stage. I will give you the form of file because it can generate great skeletons to start from. It can generate mock data easily, that's a very good point. And also, you can split very specific things as well. But it's not very good at getting the final result. So you still need those to polish that yourself. And you also get the code block by block, so you need to create your own file structure that will be scalable over time. Yes. Now we need to get the recipes from some kind of service. That's what we do. We have an API. We need a class or object that will make a request to an API. So I ask for that, something to start with. This is an API client, which works and looks okay, but it's a bit of an older approach, using conditional logs instead of a simple way for those working in iOS. It does a generic data object and it's a singlet. So before moving forward with this, I try to at least ask it to handle also the decoding from JSON, from the server into our data models. And it did that quite well. We can look at the function and the name of the function, and it has a generic parameter that you can pass when you call. So you can pass any data model. Speaking of data transfer objects, this is one of the scenarios where it's really good because you can actually give it the JSON that comes from the server and ask for the SwiftUI code, and it will match that perfectly. And I've used it several times, and it's always great for this. Usually, this is not complex code that you. This is not complex code, it's just parameters. Okay, and now we have the UI and the API connection. We need to link them together. So I asked it if it remembers the view created earlier and to generate a view model for that. And it did, and the view model works. But you have to pay attention to some things, because here, for example, it used different annotation that would make the view model recreate itself every time the view is withdrawn, which we don't want. So you need to change that observed object to state object, but this is a thing that you know only if you do have it developed. So if you're not, you're probably going to miss this and then into some bugs that are weird and you don't understand. And now to make a shortcut, we go from the view model that's generated to the API connection. So we make the request, and we have the recipes from the server side. Now we do not have to take my code for it. We have here a GIF, which reflects how the app works. We search for something, and then of course if there's no results, you have a placeholder account, you can say ingredients, and the final recipes with those ingredients. Okay, one thing that developers need to do a lot is refactoring, because you're not always having to go from scratch. So I try to see if ChatGPT knows how to refactor the code. And my expectation would be to generate the monster, which is the missing part, because we have a view model and the API service. But I didn't tell it that. I just told it we have the view model making the call to the API line. How can you move the code? And to my surprise, it generated actually very positive with the protocol and implementation. And an example of how to use it. Really impressive. And maybe made me up the grade from 3 out of 5 to 3.5 out of 5. Why 3.5? Because it's really good for DQOs, for models, and for long data. It's quite okay for a starting structure for refactoring. But it's not that great at creating beautiful UI and filling the gaps of those details that in the bottom. this, but it's actually for processing like inputs and outputs and for learning and for writing. So in general, you can use such tools for debating ideas, asking to summarize things for you, so to generate some inputs for you, or to write for you. Let's say to write email documentation or add description and so on. And in our cases, we kind of have the code on the left. If you want to release it, you will need an actual description. So I tested it for that. Rather than an actual description with some details about that. And I got this. First of all, it's nice that it also suggested a name, Echo Chef, which is okay for what we want to do. And a nice description, paragraph by paragraph, with an emoji and so on. So even if it's not a perfect final version, it's something to start from. Other tools are really good at copywriting, write something copywriting, Jasper. They are beyond the scope of this presentation, but you can try them that are tailored to specific things that you do. So that was quite a lot. But we have this kind of variety. But what happens if working with by working with these tools, you get more passionate about AI and want to actually implement it yourself. Well, if you're a mobile or if you're a web developer, you don't have to quit your job and start all over again. You can actually implement AI in mobile apps. So how can you do it, and what fields of AI are most common in mobile apps? Well, it's a big machine learning field, which it's all about models and training and so on, and the specific fields of computer vision and natural language processing. This also benefits a lot from the sensors of the phone, the camera or the microphone. In order to integrate this in your app, you have two options. You either integrate them via an API or with on-device implementation. Now, using an API for this is very similar to using classic API. So let's see how it works on the device. We have native frameworks and solutions for that. On iOS, we have Oracle. We have MLKit for an SDK for Google for all iOS and Android. And we have TensorFlow and TensorFlow Lite, which probably is perfect if you work with something. Alright, these are the frameworks of how to actually do it. To simplify it, we only need 3 steps. Find an ML model online that can work per app. There are a lot of free models on the training specific data, or food or animals and so on. Then provide inputs to those models, images, and then you read the predictions and the results. Some examples. You can use them for image classification. So you give it an image, you run the inference, and it detects the main object in your image with a degree of confidence. Like in the example to take that even further, we have object detection track, not only what's in the image, but where is in the image, again with a degree of confidence. And last but not least, processing speech and text. This includes like speech to text mapping and the sentence text and things like that. So for a recipe app, what can we do? What can we do? With the most sense would be to have some kind of object detection. So you don't have to select the ingredients manually. We have the camera. We need a camera view, so we point at your ingredients. We need a machine learning model trained on food. And we need a ability to detect multiple objects at once. We could use ChatGPT for that, but it would take a lot of time than actually starting from a sample project. Because on iOS at least, but also on Android, we have a few sample projects, even on the official website that you can start from. And you can just download the code and adapt to your app. And just a quick tutorial here, that's one difference between iOS and Android I noticed over the years. You can open a 3-year-old project in iOS and it runs perfectly, and you can open a 6-month project on Android and have some errors. I took an example here. This is the code. I added it to the recipe app, and now we can detect multiple ingredients in the app. And the next step would be to make this for ingredients list, and then make it. Okay, and now the final part. Sorry for the spoiler. Finding free machine learning models is a good starting point, but if you need something that's tailored to your implementation, say you need to analyze X-ray data, then you have to train your model on a big sample of data that's annotated, then use that model. You have tools for that. You can train machine learning models for iOS using Create and Create. For Android, it's Keras and TensorFlow, the most popular ones. And in general, you have PyTorch or Argnet, and with that, you can train a variety of machine learning model types. Now, let's zoom out a bit and wrap up our journey with some takeaways. First, it's still a good time to build an app and to get into knowing more about apps and AI. There is a lot of demand for that. And AI tools, as you can see, can help you speed up some of your workflows. We can use them for generating ideas, for graphics, although you still need to polish the graphics yourself. And the same for code. You can have a good starting structure, but there are some details that you need to fill in. And that's why I think the potential of using these tools is given not only by your skills of using them, but also by your tech experience. So for example, if you can reach from 1 to 10 at each of these, if you have a tech experience of 2 and an AI tools knowledge of 8, a product of 10 will give you 16. But if you have a tech experience of 7 and AI tools knowledge again 7, which is like average, then the product will be 14, which puts you ahead of a lot more people. Finally, if you want to learn more about AI and how it works behind the hood, then you don't have to start all over from scratch. You can begin by integrating AI features into your apps, and then you will learn more about training, inference, computer vision, and then we will start. Okay, I hope this was insightful. Thank you for being here, and I'm ready for some questions.
You actually